Drew Barrymore, once a beloved actress and host, has been thrust into the limelight for all the wrong reasons lately. From America's darling to Hollywood's biggest headache, it's safe to say that Drew's fall from grace has been nothing short of dramatic. What seemed like an inevitable rise to fame has now turned into a slow, painful slide into irrelevance. Her recent troubles can be traced to a number of moments that have made people question whether she's lost touch with who she truly is and where she came from. Let's break down how Drew went from a bright shining star to Hollywood's most talked about problem child. It all started when Drew Barrymore made headlines for being dropped as the host of the prestigious National Book Awards. What happened? She crossed a line that even Hollywood couldn't ignore. Drew's actions seemed out of touch with what is expected of someone in her position. For one, her behavior during her interviews has made people uncomfortable. There's a level of intimacy that should never be crossed in a professional setting. Her interview with Brooke Shields was a prime example. Picture this. Drew sitting on the floor with Brooke, getting so close to her face that they might as well have been spooning. It's one thing to be friendly and warm, but this went beyond what could be considered appropriate. And the kicker. Drew seemed completely unaware of how uncomfortable the situation was. Now, Drew's actions aren't just causing discomfort in private circles, they're making their way into the public eye. This isn't just about her behavior on set or in interviews anymore. People have started to notice a troubling pattern in her actions, particularly her increasingly odd on-screen habits. One of the most cringeworthy moments involved Drew getting down on her knees while interviewing a trans guest. It seemed to some like Drew was trying a little too hard to show how open-minded and progressive she was. But the act itself came across as strange and awkward. She sat there on her knees, nodding along to the conversation with a fake smile plastered on her face. Viewers could sense the inauthenticity. The whole thing felt like Drew was trying too hard to fit in with a new narrative. In trying to be an ally, she made it painfully clear that she didn't know how to truly be supportive. What's even worse is the way Drew handled the entire situation afterward. She couldn't even address the issue head-on in a meaningful way. Instead, she apologized, but it was clear her apology was less about understanding what went wrong and more about managing the fallout. The fake smiles and forced gestures weren't enough to win back the favor of viewers who saw through her attempt to appear woke. Rather than owning her mistakes and taking the opportunity to genuinely learn from them, Drew only dug herself deeper into a hole. Instead of being authentic, she chose to act out what she thought the world wanted to see. And that didn't sit well with anyone. Drew's desperation to stay relevant and fit into the mold of Hollywood's socially conscious celebrity hasn't only manifested itself in her interviews. It has also bled into her personal life in troubling ways. In fact, her professional struggles are only made worse by her personal ones. It's difficult to separate the two, and Drew's messy romantic history isn't helping her image. Drew has been married and divorced 3 times, each relationship seemingly ending as quickly as it started. Her marriage to comedian Tom Green lasted a mere year, and yet Drew continues to publicly express admiration and love for him despite their split. Her open discussions about divorce and her tendency to praise it as a positive life choice only add to her public persona as a celebrity who seems completely out of control. Hollywood loves a narrative, and right now, Drew's narrative is not a flattering one. She's the child star who couldn't quite make it, the actress who never fully grew up, and now the talk show host whose career is in free fall. It's as if Drew Barrymore can't get anything right lately. She tries to be the quirky, relatable talk show host, but it's starting to look like she's just out of touch. There's a real question now about whether she's capable of making decisions that are in her best interest. This was only made worse by her decision to bring back her show during the writers' strike. For those who don't know, the writers' strike was a huge issue in Hollywood, with many actors and producers siding with the writers in their fight for fair wages and working conditions. But Drew Barrymore, in what some would describe as a stunningly tone-deaf move, decided to bring back her show, essentially breaking the strike and defying the union. This wasn't just a poor decision, it was a huge betrayal of the people who had supported her throughout her career. The backlash was swift and harsh. Writers across the industry spoke out against her, calling her out for her hypocrisy. One writer even commented that Drew should know better, and at that point it was clear Drew had made a misstep that would be difficult to recover from. Drew's attempts to apologize were met with little empathy. Her apology, which felt insincere to many, was seen as an attempt to protect her public image rather than an honest reckoning with her actions. Instead of owning up to her mistake and explaining why it was wrong, Drew seemed more concerned with trying to save her show and her crew's jobs. "My crew needs to work," she said, but many viewers saw this as a shallow excuse. There are other ways to help her team without undermining the larger cause. Her attempts to play both sides in the strike, supporting it one moment, breaking it the next, painted her as someone who couldn't make up her mind. This indecisiveness only served to further alienate her from the Hollywood community, and it became clear that Drew was no longer the untouchable star she once was. But Drew's troubles didn't end there. She quickly became the target of criticism from her own industry, with many of her peers mocking her in public and behind the scenes. Her fellow talk show hosts were no exception. Even they began to take shots at Drew, questioning her authenticity and her ability to handle the pressures of Hollywood. It's one thing to be criticized by outsiders, but when your own industry turns on you, you know you're in trouble. And that's exactly what happened to Drew. Her once adoring fans began to wane, and her industry colleagues started distancing themselves from her. Even other celebrities started calling her out for her actions, eager to take advantage of the opportunity to drag her down. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of poor decision-making and missteps. Drew had been given the benefit of the doubt for a long time, but now it seemed like she had used up all her goodwill. Her attempts to play the role of the quirky, relatable host fell flat, and her personal life was just as much of a mess as her professional one. She couldn't seem to get anything right, and her career began to reflect that. Her reputation, once untouchable, was now in shambles. As if things weren't bad enough, Drew's most recent blow came when she was dropped as the host of the National Book Awards. This was a significant gig, one that could have helped her rebuild some of her damaged reputation. But instead of celebrating her return to the spotlight, Drew found herself being dropped by the very organization that once sought her out. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Drew Barrymore, once one of Hollywood's most beloved figures, had now become the person that the industry couldn't ignore, but also couldn't stand. The cancellation of her hosting gig was a final blow to Drew's career, and it served as a reminder that even the most beloved stars can fall. It wasn't just the public that turned on her, it was the industry itself. Drew's fall from grace has been a long time coming, and it's a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks they can ride the wave of fame without facing the consequences of their actions. Trying to be everything to everyone, in Drew's case, backfired spectacularly. It's a hard lesson, but it's one that Hollywood doesn't soon forget. Drew Barrymore is a prime example of how quickly a career can go from soaring to crashing. She thought she could play both sides of the Hollywood divide and still maintain her spot at the top. But instead, she's become the industry's biggest problem child, an example of how trying too hard to be relevant can sometimes be worse than doing nothing at all. Drew might have once been a beloved figure, but now she's just another cautionary tale in Hollywood's ever-changing landscape. Her fall from grace is swift and painful, and it's hard to see how she can recover from it.